The stories I'm about to share come from real people who thought they were safe in their own homes, until something or someone proved them wrong. These are true accounts, some sent to me by you, the viewers, and others pulled from deep in online forums. So grab a blanket, lock your doors, and maybe keep the lights on, because these stories are guaranteed to make you question every creak and shadow. Story 1. The Knocking at 3 a.m. This first story comes from a viewer named Sarah who asked to stay anonymous. Back in 2019, Sarah was a college student living in a small rental house in Ohio. It was a quiet neighborhood. Think picket fences, kids' bikes on lawns, the kind of place where nothing ever happens. Sarah's roommates had gone home for winter break, so she had the place to herself for 2 weeks. She didn't mind. She liked the peace and quiet. On the third night alone, Sarah was up late studying, her laptop glowing in the dark living room. It was around 2:45 a.m. when she heard it. A soft knock at the front door. She froze. Who would be knocking at this hour? She waited, heart pounding, hoping it was a mistake. But then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. Louder this time. Sarah crept to the window and peeked through the blinds. The porch was empty. No car in the driveway. No one on the street. Just darkness. She told herself it was probably a prank, maybe some kids messing around. But as she turned back to her laptop, the knocking started again, this time from the back door. Sarah's stomach dropped. The back door was through the kitchen, out of sight from where she stood. She grabbed her phone, ready to call 911, and tiptoed toward the kitchen. The knocking stopped just as she reached the door. She checked the lock. It was secure, and peered through the small window. Nothing but the backyard, bathed in moonlight. Relieved but shaken, Sarah went back to the living room. She was about to sit down when she heard something worse than knocking. A faint scrape, like someone dragging their nails across the window behind her. She spun around, but the blinds were closed. She couldn't see out, and whatever was out there could be looking in. Her hands were trembling as she dialed 911. The operator told her to stay calm and lock herself in a room until police arrived. Sarah barricaded herself in her bedroom, pushing a dresser against the door. The police showed up 15 minutes later and searched the property. They found no one, no footprints, no signs of tampering. But they did find something odd. Faint scratch marks on the living room window, too high up to be from an animal. Sarah stayed with a friend for the rest of the break. She never found out who or what was knocking that night, but she swears she heard that same scraping sound outside her friend's house a week later. Story 2. The Voice in the Attic. Our next story comes from a Reddit user who went by Sleepless in TX. This happened in 2017 in a rural part of Texas. The user, let's call him Jake, had just moved into an old farmhouse he'd inherited from his grandfather. The place was a fixer-upper, creaky floors, peeling wallpaper, but Jake was excited to make it his own. He was living there alone while he worked on renovations. One night, Jake was watching TV in the living room when he heard a thump from above. The farmhouse had a small attic, accessible through a hatch in the hallway ceiling. Jake figured it was just a rat, or maybe a loose board settling. Old houses make noises, right? But then he heard it again. Thump, thump, like footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Jake grabbed a flashlight and a broom, telling himself he'd scare off whatever critter was up there. He pulled down the attic ladder and climbed up, heart racing. The attic was cramped, filled with dusty boxes and insulation. His flashlight beam swept across the space, but nothing moved. No rats, no raccoons, nothing. Just as he was about to climb down, he heard a whisper. It was soft, like someone muttering under their breath, but it was coming from the far corner of the attic. Jake froze, his flashlight shaking in his hand. "Hello?" he called out, his voice cracking. The whispering stopped. He didn't wait to hear it again. He scrambled down the ladder, slammed the hatch shut, and locked it with a padlock he found in the garage. That night, he barely slept, jumping at every creak in the house. The next day, Jake called a friend to help him check the attic in daylight. They found nothing, No signs of anyone living up there. No disturbed dust. Nothing. But as they were leaving, Jake's friend noticed something carved into the underside of the hatch. The word, "listen." Jake moved out a month later. He said the final straw was waking up one night to the sound of whispering coming from inside his bedroom. Story 3, The Man in the Basement. Our final story comes from a viewer named Alex, who shared this just last year. Alex lived in a suburban house in Oregon with his parents, but they were on vacation, leaving him alone for a week. The house was old, with a creepy basement that Alex avoided. Think damp concrete, exposed pipes, and a single flickering bulb. One afternoon, Alex was doing laundry when he realized the detergent was in the basement. Grumbling, he grabbed a flashlight and headed down. The air was cold, the stairs creaking under his weight. He found the detergent and was about to head back up when he heard a low chuckle. It was faint, but unmistakable, coming from the far corner of the basement. Alex's flashlight beam darted around, catching shelves of old paint cans and a rusty bike. But no one was there. He called out, "Who's there?" No answer. He bolted upstairs, locking the basement door behind him. That night, he kept hearing noises, thumps, scratches, and once, that same chuckle, muffled through the floor. He called his parents, who told him it was probably pipes or the house settling. But Alex wasn't convinced. The next day, he worked up the courage to check the basement again, this time with a baseball bat. He found something chilling, a sleeping bag, tucked behind a stack of boxes, with an empty water bottle and a half-eaten candy bar next to it. Someone had been living down there. Alex called the police, who found signs of forced entry through a small basement window. Whoever had been there was gone, but they'd left behind a note scratched into the wall. "Thanks for the stay." Alex and his family moved shortly after. He says he still checks every basement before he enters a new house. Story 4, The Shadow in the Hallway. This story comes from a viewer who emailed me just a few months ago. Let's call her Lisa. In early 2024, Lisa was house-sitting for her aunt in a big old Victorian house in Massachusetts. Her aunt was away for a weekend, and Lisa was excited for some alone time, until the first night. Lisa was reading in the living room when she noticed the hallway light flickering. It was one of those long corridors, lined with family photos and a single bulb at the far end. She got up to check it, but as she stepped into the hallway, the light steadied, and she saw a shadow. It was tall, human-shaped, and stretched across the wall, like someone was standing just out of sight. But the hallway was empty. Lisa called out, "Hello?" No answer. She chalked it up to her imagination and went back to her book. Later that night, she woke up to footsteps, heavy, deliberate steps, pacing the hallway outside her room. Lisa grabbed her phone and peeked out. The hallway was dark, the bulb burned out. But in the faint moonlight from a window, she saw it, a shadow moving along the wall, back and forth, like it was pacing. No one was casting it. Terrified, she locked the door and stayed awake until morning. When she checked the hallway at dawn, the bulb was back on, flickering again. But here's the kicker. One of her aunt's old photos, a black and white shot of a man in a suit, was turned backward on the wall. Lisa swears it was facing forward the night before. She left that morning and never house-sat there again. Her aunt later admitted the house had odd moments, but wouldn't say more. Story 5, The Car That Waited. Our last story comes from a viewer named Taylor, who shared this in 2021. Taylor lived alone in a rural cabin in Montana, miles from the nearest town. It was peaceful, until one night in late fall. Taylor was winding down, reading by the fire, when she noticed headlights outside. Through the window, she saw a car parked at the end of her long driveway, engine running, lights on. It just sat there, idling. She figured it was someone lost. Her cabin was off a winding back road, easy to miss a turn. She waited, expecting them to leave, but 20 minutes passed, then 30, and the car didn't move. No one got out, no honk, nothing. Just those headlights cutting through the dark. Taylor grabbed her binoculars, her dad's old hunting pair, and tried to get a look. The car was too far to see details, but she could make out a shape in the driver's seat, hunched over, still. She called her brother, who lived an hour away, and he told her to stay inside and call the sheriff. The sheriff arrived 45 minutes later, and as soon as his cruiser's lights hit the driveway, the car peeled out, tires screeching. He chased it but lost it on a side road. When he checked Taylor's property, he found tire tracks and a single cigarette butt, still warm, right where the car had been. Taylor never found out who it was. The sheriff said it could have been a hunter, a drifter, or someone casing the place. She got a security camera after that, but she says she still wakes up some nights, convinced she hears an engine idling outside. Story 6. The Neighbor's Lights. This next story was posted on a neighborhood watch board in 2018 by someone we'll call Jenna. Jenna lived alone in a duplex in Seattle, sharing a wall with her neighbor, an older guy named Tom. Tom was friendly but kept to himself, and Jenna liked the arrangement, quiet and simple. One night, Jenna was home alone when she noticed something odd. Tom's lights, visible through her kitchen window, started turning on and off. First the living room, then the kitchen, then upstairs. It wasn't random. It was like someone was moving through the house. But Tom had told her he'd be out of town for a week, visiting family. Jenna watched for a while, figuring maybe he'd come back early. But then she heard a noise through the shared wall, a low rhythmic tapping, like someone knocking on the drywall. She texted Tom, asking if he was home. He replied instantly, "No, still in Portland. Why?" Jenna's stomach sank. She called the cops, keeping an eye on the lights. They kept flicking on and off, room by room, like a pattern. When the police arrived, they searched Tom's side of the duplex. No one was there, no forced entry, no signs of a break-in. But they did find something unsettling. Every light switch was sticky with some kind of residue, like someone with dirty hands had been touching them. Tom had no explanation, and neither did the cops. Jenna moved out a month later. She said the worst part was realizing the tapping stopped the second the police knocked on Tom's door, like whoever was there knew she'd called them. Story 6. The Delivery That Never Came. This one comes from a viewer named Chris, who sent this in back in 2022. Chris lived alone in a quiet suburb in Colorado, the kind of place where everyone knows their neighbors. One evening, he was home cooking dinner when his doorbell rang. He wasn't expecting anyone, but he figured it might be a late delivery. He'd ordered a book a few days earlier. Chris checked his front door camera on his phone. Sure enough, there was a guy in a hoodie holding a small package, face hidden under the hood. "Leave it on the porch," Chris called through the app. The guy nodded, set the package down, and walked off. Chris waited a minute, then opened the door to grab it. But when he stepped outside, the package was gone, and so was the delivery guy. Confused, Chris checked the camera footage again. The video showed the guy placing the package, walking away, and then, seconds later, darting back from the side of the frame to snatch it before disappearing into the dark. Chris called the delivery company. No record of a drop-off that night. He brushed it off as a weird prank, but the next night, the doorbell rang again. Same hoodie, same package, same routine. This time, Chris didn't say anything. He just watched. The guy lingered longer, staring at the camera, before leaving with the package again. By the third night, Chris was on edge. When the doorbell rang, he grabbed a bat and flung the door open mid-visit. The guy bolted, dropping the package in the yard. Chris picked it up. It was just an empty box, no label, no weight. The police found no fingerprints, but they did spot fresh scratches on Chris's back door lock, like someone had been testing it. Chris installed a deadbolt and a floodlight after that. He never saw the guy again, but he says he still gets chills thinking about what might have happened if he hadn't opened the door that third night.